gamers, this is Davidson from Beyond Solitaire, and today I'm going to be reviewing For Against Darkness, a solo RPG originally written and designed by Andrea Svilikoi. It's published by Ganesha Games. Alright, so let's just have a quick look at what For Against Darkness is. So I have the book version that I print on demand off of Amazon. It was about 12 bucks. But if you want, you can get this as a PDF off of the Ganesha Games website. What this is an old school, very old school, you can even tell by the art, right? It kind of feels like a D&D game you played as a child. Solitaire dungeon delving game that's on pen and paper, and it's just for one person, but you're controlling 4 heroes every time, which is why it's called For Against Darkness. When you open it up, you'll see a table of contents, which is helpful because sometimes things aren't totally intuitive when it comes to where to find them. You get an introduction, which will give you a realistic assessment of the length of the game. All you really need to play this, by the way, is a sheet of paper, preferably with a grid on it, this book, and some D6s, and a pencil. And that's cool to me. You can make an entire game out of just those materials. The classes that are available in the book are pretty predictable. So you can, warrior, a cleric, they all have different traits, armor, weapons, starting equipment, life. So they'll have special abilities. So as you can see, a cleric is slightly more complicated than a warrior, but none of it's too crazy. You have a rogue, a wizard, a barbarian. And then, so I don't actually love this. Your other classes, so the other classes are like jobs or like identities, but then you have like an elf, a dwarf, and a halfling. I'm not wild about it, but the game is still fun. You are told about all of your equipment, and then there are instructions for how to proceed through your adventure against various monsters. And one thing that makes the game so interesting is that in order to build your dungeon, you're really rolling dice, and then you're drawing the shapes that the dice tell you. So for your entrance room, you're going to roll a d6, and whatever comes up, that's your entrance room. You're building your dungeon out on a piece of graph paper, and then after your entrance room, you're going to be rolling basically 2 d6s. It's like a d6d6 system to determine which of the rooms you're going to draw next, where the doors are, how they're going to be positioned. Then, once you've drawn your room on your graph paper, you will roll to see what is in the room. And then there are other tables that will help you from there. So if you roll to fight vermin, you'll roll on the vermin table to see exactly which vermin you fight. If you're on the minions table, you roll on the minion table to see exactly which minions you're going to fight. And then eventually you are going to encounter some bosses. And then depending on what other enemies you have encountered so far, one of those bosses is going to become the final boss. And the rest of the book is essentially tables to help you figure out what you're encountering and what you can do. There's also a little bit more instruction back here, so that's one thing that makes the book just a little bit unintuitive. Make sure that you check the text partway through the book as well as right at the beginning if you want minimal confusion. There's also a fact at the back to help you out. So what this book is providing you is not a preset game, but a system that's going to let you create your own solo RPG experience, or at least the beginning of one. As you return to this book again and again and have dungeon delving adventures, your heroes are going to get more treasure, get more equipment, level up until you're ready to move on to something else in this series. So I'm actually going to take you to my laptop right now to show you what some of those options are. So in addition to just showing you the book that I have, I also wanted to actually give you a little tour of some of the For Against Darkness stuff that's on my computer, because I think this is where the game gets really exciting, but the PDFs were cheaper and I ended up actually just having them on PDF. So let's have a little tour. I thought y'all might appreciate it. So I've played some other For Against Darkness stuff, but these are the PDFs that I personally own. So we have Caves of the Kobold Slave Masters. So this is an example of an adventure for For Against Darkness, where it's recommended for characters of level 1 or 2, and that's going to mean that you are playing with your lower level heroes. You could be the very same ones that you made for For Against Darkness, but there's an actual adventure to play with them. And there are a couple of other adventures that are tailor-made for lower level heroes, and then as they grow, there are other adventures that you can play. So in this case, you're actually going to have 3 different chapters that you can play through with rules for all of that, and fresh tables to make the game work. And for me, this is the thing that makes For Against Darkness interesting, is that you're able to expand the system with a number of different PDFs, books, however you want to have them. There are also some totally different adventures that use the For Against Darkness system, so you can do something where you just have heroes that you created with that first book, and then you add on to them with some adventures, and then when they get higher level, you're going to want something that is called For Against the Abyss. So this is the book that is for characters that are levels 5 to 9. So if you've been playing For Against Darkness, and you have these higher level characters because you've been playing for a little bit, then there is actually a book that will satisfy your need to develop your characters further, and some adventures that go with that. But what excites me is that there are also some very, very different adventures that are in this system that are not traditional dungeon crawlers, but that use that same system with the For Against Darkness, For Against the Abyss rule sets to create new stuff. So the Latin teacher in me is totally about For Against the Titans, where instead of as traditional heroes, you can actually create characters who are children of the gods, who go on a Greek mythology-inspired overworld adventure. So if you try this, it'll be separate from your other characters, but it's something different where you can use rules you already know to have a different solo RPG adventure. And I'm also extremely fond of this one, which is called The Knight of Destiny. So this is like a King Arthur For Against Darkness adventure where you're trying to find the Holy Grail. I think that is so cool. So once again, you have lots of art and then specialized rules that have new classes and help you walk through the kind of journey that your Arthurian knight can have. It also includes a new class that's called the Paladin that can actually be integrated into a normal game of For Against Darkness. So the different entries into the series are written with the understanding that you're going to use stuff together, and there are rules that'll show you how to swap things back and forth. And then I'm also very fond of Treasure Hunters of Charlemagne. I'm totally down for experimental adventures within game systems that are this simple, because I think that they're what make it special. So while in the Arthurian one, you're looking for the Holy Grail, in the Charlemagne entry into the series, you're actually looking for the Spear of Destiny. So as I mentioned before, you'll need For Against Darkness and For Against the Abyss, so you'll have the core rules, but there's so much you can do with them that really is kind of surprising what you can make out of a game like this. And I wanted to make sure that you saw a glimpse of the breadth of what the game can offer. I also wanted to mention that there are some good character sheets on Board Game Geek. So I'm particularly partial to this play sheet, which is one the Gray Board Gamer also has used in his playthroughs. So there's like a little guide, and it looks like this, where you have a grid. It's the recommended size, so use graph paper to make your dungeon, and this will print it off for you nicely. And you'll actually get little helps to help you play the game, a sheet to help you track your encounters, a sheet to help you track your party members, and then some extras, including a cheat sheet that'll help you see how rooms are sized without having to flip through the book, and more. So there are people who are enthusiastic about this game and who make player aids to assist other people in their time with it. So I actually linked this particular help sheet in the notes of this video. So if you want to go download it yourself, you can. And it's definitely helpful if you don't have graph paper sitting around the house. So now for some final thoughts. For Against Darkness is an interesting game to review because in some ways I feel like what you get out of the system is what you put in. So what's great about it is that you have this very open system that you're able to tailor into whatever you want. You can make your heroes, you can invest in them as much as you want, or you can just kind of play a quick game that is a one-off because you wanted to have a dungeon crawl tonight. And all of those options are yours. You can choose to just dungeon crawl forever because that's what you like, or you can try some of the pre-written adventures and do a little campaign for yourself. You can stick to the traditional fantasy script, or you can try something unusual like Knight of Destiny or For Against the Titans. So the flexibility of this system is, I think, what makes it enjoyable. And I think that one of the reasons it is so flexible, and there are so many entries into it, including some more experimental feeling ones like the Charlemagne Spear of Destiny hunt, I think those are made possible because the game is so inexpensive and so accessible. It doesn't have all of the beautifully produced minis and dungeon tiles and bling that you might expect from so many of the dungeon crawlers that are successful on Kickstarter right now. It can be done with just a piece of paper, a pencil, and your imagination. But for me, that's what is charming about it. I'm not always a dungeon crawler person, but I like For Against Darkness because it really has that nostalgia factor and that sense that you're really making your own adventure. I like drawing in my map on graph paper. I like that I can take the same heroes out again and again as long as I keep records of my party. And I like that I can easily find another adventure for For Against Darkness by going on the internet and paying a small amount of money for a PDF download. The entries into this series really are affordable, and I like that they're so low tech, and I like that they're so simple. That said, depending on how you like to play games, you may not find that you get very much out of For Against Darkness. I think that if I'd stopped at the very first For Against Darkness book, I would not have developed as much of an appreciation for the game. Leveling up in it is slow, it doesn't really have a storyline, and it can just kind of feel random, and occasionally annoying unless you really embrace the system and you're willing to make it what you want and to push yourself beyond just those base rules and like, oh, I just went in a dungeon and rolled some dice, that was it. So if you want your imaginative world to be created for you in a game, which is completely legitimate as a preference, then 4 Against Darkness may not be as enjoyable for you. This is definitely one of those games that you have to put yourself into in order to reap the maximum rewards for it. The fact that the game is cheap and readily available is admittedly also balanced out by the fact that the publication isn't perfect. This is a self-published game. Sometimes the art looks stylistically inconsistent from page to page. Things aren't always organized the way that you like. You're going to run across the occasional typo. Basically, the books can be a little bit rough around the edges. I've personally decided that that doesn't bother me, but it really might bother you. So I recommend trying it just because they're so inexpensive, but you should go in with the mindset that the core rules are worth learning because there are more adventures ahead. They may not totally satisfy you in themselves. And you also have to go in knowing that the system is flexible, but maybe not as neat and clean as you might like from a slicker published game. But especially right now, if you have that role-playing urge, you miss playing Dungeons & Dragons with your friends, you miss the old days of playing it when you were a kid, and you want to have a quick, cheap dungeon crawl adventure, then really 4 Against Darkness is a great place to start. It's super accessible, there's a large online community of people who love it, and there are enough adventures with different flavor for pretty much anybody to find something in the system that they're going to like. So for that, as a system, I give 4 Against Darkness an 8 out of 10 and a Dice Tower seal of approval. Happy gaming.